Hello, I am Joel McLeod.
And I'm Roland Tanner.
And welcome to the 905er. February, as many of you are aware, is Black History Month. Each year, during the month of February, figures and prominent individuals of African origin, whether they be activists, politicians, artists, musicians, authors, or historical figures, are front and center in our schools and libraries. People of African descent have lived and worked on this continent since the first Europeans arrived. Slavery was a part of colonization of the continent and is tied to the foundations of Canada as much as it is to the foundations of the United States. The struggles for equality existed here in the 905 and in Canada too. And yet, how can over 400 years of history in North America be confined to merely 1 month of the year in our schools? No doubt, you can agree this is a very, very surface level telling of a much rich and very much complex history here in Canada. So does this mean we are not doing a great job of telling what ultimately is our own story? The story of Black Canadians, and for that matter, other minorities, who have worked to build what today is the country of Canada and that we all wish to enjoy. On that note, we welcome back to the podcast Kojo Damptey to talk on the importance of Black History Month and how it ought to be a stepping stone to a much more rich and diverse conversation on the true history of this part of Ontario and Canada as a whole, and how it can help to dismantle systemic racism that permeates our culture. Kojo is the former executive director of the Hamilton Centre for Civic Inclusion. He is a former candidate for Hamilton City Council, an award-winning musician, and is an instructor at McMaster University. Kojo joins us today. Hello, and welcome, Kojo Damptey, back for a second round on the 905er. Thank you very much for taking the time from your schedule to come on to discuss, it's a big topic, Black History Month is going on right now. So thank you. I'm rambling here. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. I find, I don't know why this is potentially a touchy subject. Like it's just, it's always one of those things, like, I don't understand why we tend, Black History Month is mostly confined to our education system, but it's always something that I've always found to be, I've always puzzled, like, why do we confine an entire group of people's history to 1 month? Why is it that we just say, okay, we'll focus on 1 month of education on the history of Black peoples in Canada, and that's that. It might, like, what are your thoughts on that? Am I not getting the right message here, or what's going on? What am I not getting right here?
So there are a couple of things. The idea of Black History Month, whether it was with Woodson in the States and here in Canada, some advocacy groups that push the Canadian government and provincial government to talk about Black History Month, comes from the fact that the larger population do not know about the contributions of Black Canadians or African Americans or even Africans and the African diaspora. So this was meant as a systemic way to institutionalize some of the contributions of people of African descent across the world, right? Because when you have governments proclaim a month, a day, whatever it might be, a period of time to say we need to focus or celebrate contributions, then it brings into focus some of the things that people of African descent have contributed. There's also the other piece of that history or histories is something too that exposes institutions, right? So whether we talk about America or Canada, it exposes some of the atrocious things that these respective countries and Europe, other European countries, did to people of African descent. So you have that piece of it where institutions don't want to acknowledge what they've done, and people of African descent want to again institutionalize or look at systemic ways in which we can bring these issues and these histories into focus for discussion, education, change in policy, and what have you.
And I just want to clarify my last question because I realized it was very poorly worded, and so thank you for clarifying that. But I agree that the intent for that, and I'm just wondering, like, is the reason why I brought it up is that my daughter is in school, and so she's learning about she's learning about Black history, but it's not Canadian Black history. I find when people say Black history, they focus. We're talking about heroes. Okay, well, who you're talking about? And they're talking about Dr. Martin Luther King. Okay, absolutely. Rosa Parks. I said, okay, yeah, these are very important people that you need to learn about. But then when I asked, like, why are they important? What do they do? And I found like the lesson that my daughter's being taught was just a little lackluster for the contributions that these individuals made to all of society. And I'm just wondering, in this, are we too afraid of actually teaching Black history to our students? Because I just found that the conversation is just like, okay, Rosa Parks didn't want to give up her seat to a white man on the bus. It's like, yeah, but there's more to it than just that. There's the idea, again, that systemic racism, the institutionalization, the legal system that was enforced upon her, and her, like, that civil discord, that civil disobedience to strike change and strike up a movement. And that, I was just, how do you confine that to a whole month? And it's just, I was like, really, like, so much more to this than just, okay, let's do a quick unit on it, and that's solve Black anti-racism, or that's going to solve institutionalized systemic racism in our society.
Yeah, so I think for people of African descent, our mantra has been Black history is not just February, right? So
Yeah,
for
yeah.
us, it's 365 days throughout the year. And I think what you are discussing is what people of African descent have always been trying to bring attention to, right? So let's take, since we're in Canada, let's
Yes,
look at
thank
the
you.
Canadian, let's look
Thank
at the
you. Thank you.
Canadian context. So let's take Hamilton, for example. There were Black communities that were together, that were formed, Black settlements, before Hamilton was even created as a city, right? So some of those Black settlements were actually dispersed by the provincial government. That is not discussed, right? Let's take Jackie Washington, the first Black radio host at CHML. He used to hang out with Count Basie and other jazz musicians across the world. And when they would come to Hamilton, they would play in the bar, but they were not allowed to stay in the hotel. Right? There's also stories of KKK members marching on James Street, downtown James Street. And actually, there was an incident between an indigenous Black person and a white woman who were going to be married, and there were KKK members in Oakville and Burlington and Hamilton that were really upset, and they actually got a police escort to to go and disrupt this marriage that was happening. So I think those instances are not discussed, and those instances are not taught in schools, highlighted publicly, and we tend to cherry pick the things that make white people comfortable. So I have a dream speech, or Viola Desmond, or um, Lincoln Alexandra, right? Those things make us comfortable, right? But the institutional racism and the individual racism, those things are not talked about. This weekend, we're going to be having the John C. Holland Awards. That was named after John C. Holland, who was the Reverend Minister at Stewart's Memorial Church. Stewart's Memorial Church was part of the Underground Railroad here in Hamilton. And John C. Holland had to, talk about racial discrimination in the hiring process here in Hamilton. Various institutions. We're talking about the steel mills, Hamilton Police, all of those things. But those things are not talked about. So I think that's what happens during Black History Month. A number of Black community members go into schools and have talks and discussions to highlight these specific instances. But the general celebration would focus on the Viola Desmonds, the Rosa Parks, the Martin Luther King, and even with Martin Luther King, people tend to focus on the peaceful, I'll put it in quotes, aspects of things, and not talk about some of the civil disobedience and poignant things he talked about when dealing with segregation and anti-Black racism.
With Martin Luther King, it reminds me of the extent of how I grew up watching South Africa and Nelson Mandela while he was still in prison. And in Britain had a shockingly bad, or British government at the time under Margaret Thatcher had a shockingly bad attitude towards apartheid. I mean, even though it was officially against it, it would do nothing about it. It wouldn't stop trading with apartheid. It wouldn't. I mean, I'm telling you what you already know, but just in case anybody listening doesn't. And the kind of excuse for that often was that, well, the ANC won't completely renounce violence. Basically they're a terrorist organization, just like the IRA was what people would say. It's like, well, the ANC are no better than the IRA. Nelson Mandela was a terrorist. Now, when we look back, and I mean that was all complete horseshit, by the way. But now, when Nelson Mandela came out of prison, there was this transformation because he became a more comfortable figure for white people, and now no one would dare say, well, the ANC, and that's kind of happened with Martin Luther King, that there is a process of almost appropriating Black history, if you like, to comfortable white narratives. Is that something you'd say that happens?
Yes, I think it happens a lot. I think that's what white supremacy does, right? It allows white institutions and white people to cherry pick what makes them comfortable. There's a documentary, it's called The Ninth Floor. And I don't know if you've seen it or not. It talks about anti-Black racism in Montreal. There were a number of Black students at the time that took over the ninth floor of one of the departments, protesting some of the things that the university was doing at the time. So I think the broad and extensive ways in which anti-Black racism works, whether it's in Canada, America, or even on the continent, right? 1 month does not give you the opportunity to delve into it. And our curriculums don't even have the time to do that, because if they did that, that would mean that we would have to rethink what our society and our institutions do, right? So you can talk about our public institutions, whether it's our public school boards, universities, our healthcare system, policing system, and even our governing system, right? I always tell people there was a point where only white men that owned property could be elected to office, right? So when you have a system that says that, that's why enslavement exists, because you are literally putting into law the exclusion and marginalization of people that do not own property. And that goes whether it's to Black populations, indigenous populations, and at that time, women, white women, and other women as well. So when we start looking at all of these structural things, then we begin to ask ourselves, the current system that we have, is it truly working for everybody?
Well, on that note, like this, a lot of the stuff that you just mentioned to us at the start, that was stuff that you kind of enlightened me as we were talking. Like, this is stuff I did not know about Canadian history, and like we're not taught about that in Canadian schools. It's not something we're told about. Like the story of like Africville in Nova Scotia. That I didn't find out until far later in my education, which was it's a shame, but that you're not allowed to connect these threads between the past and the present, right? It's kind of like the past happened then, and now is now, and the two never shall meet. And that's what I thought. We talked about like Lincoln Alexander, the first Black Lieutenant Governor General in Ontario, and it's like, wow, that's such a great, congratulations to him. But we never asked the question: how did it take so long for us to have a Black governor, a Black man elected to office in that way? Like, why was there such a huge gap between Confederation and recent history? And that discussion never happens, I find.
Yes, and I mean we can go on and on. A little tidbit: if I had won, I would have been the second Black councillor in the whole of Hamilton's history.
But isn't that like what we're talking about? Like that history of thread to the present day. Like, why is that the case? Why is Sorry, I interrupted you, and
No, that's okay. Sorry. Yeah, no. Yes, and that's why for people of African descent, we say that is anti-Black racism. That is white supremacy at work. And I gave a keynote in Brantford last week, and I said we need white folks to start having some of these discussions and also challenging these ideas. You mentioned the idea of not connecting the threads. I think on my Twitter I put a photo of a poster that said, the mayor of Boston and police officers were supposed to kidnap freed black folks, and someone said, well, that was 100 and something years ago. But the thread there was to say, if you had an institution, the government and police officers literally going out to catch people, kidnap them, and now 100 and so years later, you still have those institutions brutalizing Black, Indigenous, and racialized people. What is the thread? For us, we get the thread. but it looks like white folks and other folks don't get the thread. So that's also the purpose of having us talk about Black History Month. And I think there are a number of Canadian historians that also say, Black history is Canadian history. But then when we talk about something like Sir John Macdonald, there's a strength in that is our history. We need to talk about it. Don't take down the statue. Okay. But then when now we talk about the impacts of that history, everybody says, no, that was 100 and what so years ago. So again, for us, we know the threats, we know the impacts, and now that's the general public and people who do not know or haven't been exposed to this, are they starting to get the threats? And I think some folks are, some folks aren't. One last example is we in Hamilton, we featured 16 Black Hamiltonians. Their banners can be seen on James Street North, and we have posters and biographies of all these individuals in libraries and municipal centers. There's Sophia Pooley, who was enslaved to Joseph Brant and Samuel Hart. Those individuals have their names and their stories etched in Hamilton, and yet Sophia's story is not etched in Hamilton, right? So that speaks to how, again, our institutions are built to exclude Black and Indigenous and racialized folks while upholding white history and white ideas about what is important and what is not important.
I guess there's a couple of things I want to ask. I mean, I think there's a huge problem that history teaching in Canada. Canada is a country that is very bad at understanding its past. And the story used to be, I remember when I came to Canada, because my background was as a historian, and people would say, well, Canadian history is so boring, nothing ever happened, but that's actually the myth, right? That Canada is Canada the good. The problems that the US had or other countries had were, okay, maybe Canada wasn't perfect, but it was so much better. The RCMP were a peacekeeping. I mean, I read, this was written in a recent biography of John A. Macdonald. The RCMP were basically a peacekeeping force to, it's like, well, why are they dressed like soldiers? That's the only reason for wearing red is because they're meant to look like the military, not like the police. And there's that comfortable myth of Canada good, which made Canadian history very boring, because it's like, well, we never did anything really controversial. And the facts of it are that Canadian history is very interesting because just the same things were happening as happened everywhere else where colonialism happened and where oppression of other people happened and all those other things. Now, I had a question and it's gone right out of my head, which is what happens when we record early in the morning. But I mean, I guess that's part of I feel like that's a big part of the reason why there's kind of a pushback always against people pointing out the crimes of the past, because for white people, it's like we have this comfortable sense of self, and our Canadian sense of Canadian pride is wrapped up in all those comfortable ideas. And when that's attacked, it's like, oh, I don't want that to be taken away from me. I mean, is that kind of something that you feel is going on with this whole sort of issue?
Yes, I think that's it. I also think that, again, that means that you have to reorient how you think and how you behave and how you interact with institutions, right? I use the term white luxury, right? Certain white people have the luxury to say, no, that isn't our history. But Black communities that have been here before Hamilton was even a city do not have that luxury, right? And one thing I also say is, let's take, you talked about Canadian history. There were Japanese internment camps. The Ministry of Immigration at the time, during World War II, penned away ships that had Jewish communities and folks that were leaving World War II, right? And the reason they turned those ships away was the same reason that Black people have been marginalized, excluded. Chinese communities have been excluded. Japanese communities have been excluded. And even to make it further complicated, Italian communities, Irish communities, right? So for us, when we're talking about these issues, yes, it might say Black History Month, but we do understand all the different ways in which other communities have been marginalized. And that's why I say sometimes people feel like when they hear these stories, it's so grotesque and comes with guilt. They don't know what to do. So the thing is, okay, this happened years ago. Let's not talk about it. But for us, we're talking about it because we need to change the systems because they're going to continue. And if we do not change the systems, it's going to get to a position where now people get frustrated. And another point too is when we say people of African descent, remember that the way people identify are also they vary, right? You could identify as Black, but maybe you're Black and Latino. You could identify as Black, but you're Black and Jewish. You could identify as Black, but you're Black and queer, right? You could be a Black Italian Canadian, right? So let's not think that when one identity is talked about, we are not thinking about how they relate to other identities that have been historically under-reserved, underrepresented, or marginalized. So I think that's one of the things that also prevent people from engaging or even thinking that this is something that they have to respond to.
So there's something you mentioned earlier in the conversation was, I personally think it all comes down to our education system. I think that we need to start tearing back some of the curtains that we've been, or some of the stories that we've been told. At least as a white Canadian growing up, like the story was always our relationship in the Underground Railroad was just, oh, we're the last stop, right? We're all the slaves running away from the South. Well, they came to Canada and everything was hunky dory and perfect ever since. No problems. That was the narrative that I was fed, and that's what a lot of white Canadians were fed. So in the last few years, like when we've seen stories of, like in Kamloops with the mass graves at the residential schools, that coming like that. I know for any Indigenous Canadian who's listening now, they say, well, that was our history. For white Canadians, that was a shock to us. We had no idea that was going on. I know for myself, when I first heard that story, I was like, oh my God, that's horrific. Like that was done in our name to these people. And I'm not saying this to apologize. I'm just saying like that, I think for a lot of white Canadians, that was a shocker. Like that was not the story that we were told growing up. That was not what was taught in our history classes. And so I bring it back to the education system and say, like, how can we revamp our education system, change our curriculum, change our processes so that we tell the true history of Canada, the successes along with the failures, so that we learn the lessons of the past, so that we don't repeat them in the present. We cut the threads, as you speak, in the present, and we could kind of start building a better future for all Canadians, so that Black, Indigenous, LGBTQ, and white Canadians, we can all build a better country, better province, and better cities, that we can all live harmoniously. Maybe I'm talking a utopian pipe dream here, but I really do think it comes down to our education system.
If you can schedule a meeting with Minister Lecce and have that done, that would be great.
I've been trying to get him on the podcast for years, Kojo.
That was just me being rhetorical. So what you are saying is what Black and Indigenous communities have been saying for eons, right? We know. I don't know why other folks in the country don't know. You can even talk about missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and Two-Spirit people, right? Mm-hmm. This is something that has been going on with 60 Scoop, like it's been going on, right? So if you were to change the curriculum, right, it is going to take a monumental change. I'll give you one example. The organization I work with, the Hamilton Center for Civic Inclusion, the Ministry of Education gave us a grant to look at safety in schools for Black students. In the recommendations, one of them were that Black students wanted, a Black grad coach, someone that they could go to, confide in, help with support, all of that stuff. So we released this report. It's sent to the ministry. We don't know what's happening. It's probably on a shelf somewhere. And it took, I would say, maybe a year and a half for the Catholic board to implement a Black grad coach system. Okay,
I'm amazed that they did. I mean,
that's
almost fast by the speed of government.
Yeah, well, there's something called community organizing that allows for that to happen in some expedient ways. So, so they eventually implemented the system. Good. However, we are hearing that there's pushback because of this system that has been implemented. Why? Because some people believe that's reverse racism, right? So what does that say? If you have a public education systems and they believe that supporting Black and other racialized students is reverse racism, what does that tell you about the society that we are in and the stranglehold that white supremacy has, right? Because when people say reverse racism, what does that mean? Are you saying that racism exists? Because then it means you're saying racism exists, but it's reversed. Okay, so if racism exists, then what were you doing to address the initial racism that you think exists to now say that there's reverse racism?
It's a theme of it's just the theme of the last few years of the sort of the Trump era, if we're forced to call it that. Everything that's happened with this, what's basically a massive white reaction to the suggestion that maybe you shouldn't have automatic, privilege. That everybody should have the same amount of opportunity, and the reaction always is that when it's suggested that it's something that's been said to me numerous times by different people is, well, you can't get a job here anymore because all the jobs go to Black people, all the jobs go to women now, all the jobs go to people who aren't blonde women, that was something that was said to me. And it's like, no, that's not what's happening. What's happening is that you used not to have to compete in the market with anybody who wasn't blonde, who wasn't white. And now you're having to compete on hopefully a more equal playing field. But even that kind of has created this massive reaction amongst a really upsettingly large sector of kind of white society. And we were seeing the federal conservatives basically embrace that movement. I don't know, stupid question. How do we turn this around?
How do we turn this around? I think there's always, I don't know if you've seen this picture of a huge iceberg where there's a little tip at the on the top, and then underneath the sea there's this huge there's this huge iceberg. And I think all of us have to start chipping away at the iceberg that's underneath. It may seem insurmountable, but I look at it this way. In the 1800s, there were Europeans that came up with this idea of scientific racism, right? That if you look at people's skulls and the color that they exhibit, their skin color, that ties into their superiority and their inferiority, right? Obviously, 2023, that sounds ludicrous. But during that time, that was then weaponized, right? To enslave people, to starve people, to commit genocide, to do all of these things. And I think sometimes people have inherently accepted that idea of scientific racism, right? So when you see Black people, you think you have your own stereotypes. When you see Indigenous folks, you have your own stereotypes. Those things come from centuries of writing and talking about people in certain ways. So we have to undo all of that work. We have to talk about Sophia Pooley. We have to talk about John C. Holland Awards. We have to talk about the 60 Scoops. We have to talk about the ways in which Indigenous communities and Black communities were working together, right? There are stories of Indigenous communities supporting folks that were running away from the states. So those are all of the things that we have to do, and it has to be done collectively.
So, I mean, we're coming up on our time here, but I mean, actually, just I thought maybe, given you're extremely knowledgeable on the subject, clearly, and I thought maybe, in the last few minutes we have here, I mean, what are some stories that we might not have heard, that our listeners might not have heard, about the experience of Black Canadians, of people living in Canada? You've mentioned a few already, but give us some more examples of things that really should be better known, perhaps.
Yeah, so I talked about Sophia Pooley. I talked about John C. Holland Awards. I'll mention Dr. Tilly Johnson. She had a Caribbean food store at the Hamilton's Market. First one that would sell Caribbean products, African products, and actually even sued the city of Hamilton for N1 for discriminatory acts. We also have Denise J. Brooks. Denise J. Brooks was an advocate for health equity here in Hamilton. She was the executive director of Hamilton Urban Core, and Hamilton Urban Core is going to be opening a new building up on, I believe, Cannon Street, and so that building is going to be called the Denise J. Brooks building. And Hamilton Urban Core has been working with many communities around outcomes of public health. We also have Vince Hall. Vince Hall was one of the founders of the African Canadian Caribbean Association. They are one of the most prominent Black organizations here in Hamilton that have been supporting the Caribbean community, the Black community. They have a building on Barton, and they also have another building at 423 King Street. That's where HCCI and other organizations. That's where our offices are. So those are some of the key highlights in terms of individuals that are living with us. We have Terry Bedminster, Saja Stiller. these are folks that organize the John C. Holland Awards, and so we'll be celebrating that with them this Saturday. And also a last shout out to the French Center up on Barton Street. They also support the African Francophone community, because that's another demographic of folks here in Hamilton that are largely unseen and unknown. So shout outs to the French Center.
Okay, well, we should probably leave it there. We'll put some links into the show notes to something to the John C. Holland Awards and a few other things. And thanks again, Kojo, for joining us today. I'm sure we'll speak to you again in the future. And yeah, enjoy it is the right word. Enjoy the rest of the month. I don't know. Let's just turn it into Black History. Yeah. Stop talking. Yeah. Good, always good advice for me, particularly before midday.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Kojo.
All right, thank you very much, and have a good weekend.
Thanks. All right.
Okay. Bye-bye.
That's it for this episode of the 905er. Thank you for listening. As always, you can send us your feedback, thoughts, and concerns, or ideas for future episodes to our email, info@905er.ca. We'd love to hear from you. You can help us keep the 905er going by financially supporting us through Patreon as well as PayPal. Visit us at 905er.ca and click on the support tab. As well, links are in the show notes for your convenience. Lastly, you can find us on social media. Search for _905er on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So long for now. See you next time.
Looking to make the most out of this life and optimize your personal wellness? Then check out the Natural Man Podcast. Join me, host Mike C., as we explore all areas of human wellness, physical, mental, and emotional. Learn strategies to optimize your own well-being and be in the driver's seat of your own health. Remember, your doctor works for you. Learn biohacks, neurohacks, ways to improve sleep, and ways to optimize your body and your mind. Check us out on Apple, Spotify, the Fountain app, and at naturalmanpodcast.com.